Time to make the donuts. Well, it is cloudy and gloomy today, but there are things that can brighten our day, and that's Dunkin' Donuts. Guess which one's mine? How you guys doing? Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm Jimmy. But you all know we're making it work, says right down there on the bottom of the video title. Appreciate you being here. We got 3 or 4 cars out in the parking lot towed in. We got a Ford, Toyota, and a Pontiac. Plus we have the work left over from last week too. So we're gonna be pretty busy today. We'll see what happens. I think we got approval on a couple of jobs left over and all kinds of cool stuff. So let's have some fun. Let's see if we can learn a thing or two, both me and you. Stay tuned. Alright, first order of business, lots of updates. Haven't done it again since I got my topology update a long time ago. This thing will update pretty fast too. It rolls right through them. Let's get that done and see what we're doing first. This car might look familiar. Came back with a check engine light on now. Knock sensor code. You can see the 2 knock sensors. Knock sensor 1 working correctly. Knock sensor 2 not working so great. Similar voltage. We'll give it a little gas and we'll see what happens with the readings. I've been poking around in there with my pocket screwdriver to make sure the connector is good. It's under where we worked, but you don't disconnect them when you do the job. Let's go inside here and see what we can see. The phone, it's ringing. Oh, that's my wife. Gotta go. All right, let's give this bad Johnny a little gas. It's weird, the one sensor goes down, the other goes up. They should both go up. Something going on with that sensor. If I had a bad connection, it would be flatlining. But what it does do is when you take it on a road test, if you romp on it real good, then it'll set a pending code, and when it does that, it flatlines the orange sensor, the knock sensor 2, 0.4 volt one. It flatlines, it goes to 0.14 volts, like it disregards it because it sets a pending code because it doesn't like the way it's working. So it looks like now there's something going on with the knock sensor on this gobstopper. So things keep happening with this car. I don't know why. Maybe it's possessed. I don't know. We got to have it exercised. But I noticed in the freeze frame data from the code that he was at 85% throttle and almost 4,000 engine RPM. So he romped on it, and that's when the code happens. If you drive normally, it doesn't set this code. So it's kind of strange, but that's about as far as I'm going on this one. So let's see what we're going to do, and we'll let you know. Oh, that's nice. My love for you is on fire. This here Nissan Quest. Intake manifold has to come off so we can do valve cover gaskets. And the folks over at Labor Guide place said 2.7 hours. So remove intake plenum is the first step. And it says something about disconnecting the power steering hose and stuff, which they usually have brackets on the back of the intake. And there'll be a brace back there too. I don't know if I should take the wiper cowl off. It doesn't say anything about it. It just says, good luck, you're on your own. Looks like someone might have had sockets on there not too long ago, but all we can do is what we're supposed to do. Check engine lights on too, but I made a note about it. Let's do it. I love minivans. Set up my trusty underhood Astro light. I don't know why, because half the engine's under the wiper cowl and it doesn't help that much, but it might give me a little light. Looks like the harness blocks this bolt, so that's pretty cool. It's got a hard plastic harness that I'll have to find out where that thing goes to. My goodness gracious. If this moved over just about 1/4 of an inch, it wouldn't be in the way, would it? So I'm gonna go ahead and take this wiper cowl out of the way just because I think it'll be easier. Even if it takes longer, it won't be as hard to get to everything. Just cleaner job. Yeah, pop these little covers off. And the nuts are under them. And then once these wiper arms are out of the way, it's some plastic clips. And you take the plastic cover off, and the wiper assembly gets removed after that. about your washer. Try to drape that somewhere where you won't forget it, like over a fender. There you go. Now I just got to take all these 10s out of here, and this thing should pull out.
All the new V3 companies really passed them already.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, they've been fine. That's been fine.
Do it. You can do it. I really like this impact driver tool. It's my most used tool of all, and it's a little bit too strong for a quarter drive bit, but they're cheap. You break one, they're $6, unless you get a snap-on one. Those are way better. They're like $81. I'm sorry to the snap-on fans. I don't mean nothing, Bill. It's not that I hate snap-on. I'm just saying it's really expensive. That's all. There's a lot of things going on in these Nissans, Datsun, whatever you like. You know, Nissan used the name Datsun when they first came to the U.S. in case it failed. Nissan didn't want to disgrace the reputation of their brand if they failed in the U.S. So they came up with Datsun as an experiment. And once it did well, they changed the name to what it really was, Nissan. You got to take all the cool stuff has to come out of your way. I know. This is an afterthought relay box. They're like, oh crap, we forgot the relays. Where are we going to put them? Oh look, this bolt's loose. I didn't loosen it. That's terrible news. We'll have to tighten that. Alright. Give me a hard time. I'm going to get the pry tools and it's going to get serious. They do have a couple of larger bolts that go to the strut, helping to hold the wiper cowl together. Uh-oh. I got to turn it to loose. As they say, the other off. There's one on each side. This looks like it holds it, but it doesn't. It's just next to the bracket. So we're getting close now. I can feel it. They did hide a couple more bolts under the rubber things. I wasn't aware of that until I tried to lift it, and it still felt pretty solid. Two more. Uh-oh. That's a little NASCAR taste for you. Oh, that's nice. Look at that. Oh, look. Here's the rest of the engine. Just as the phone rings, you get that off. That's just how it works. Yeah, now we can get work done. Nice. Now it's like a sedan almost. One loose clamp. Two loose clamps.
There's no TSP on it.
Mass air connector. Uh-oh. Look at this filter, it's not sitting there flat. That's terrible. It's got the high performance cotton air filter, but according to those gaps, it doesn't filter much of anything, so it must be really fast. I used the old carbine 5mm Allen quarter drive and took the throttle body bolts out. That way you don't have to disconnect the coolant hoses. I just set it off to the side. There's plenty of room to work that way. No big deal. You don't have to spill any coolant. It'll be like that. Stay in there square. Now, these are usually pretty good about getting them by hand once you break them loose. It's one of the things I love about Japanese cars. Most of the time, break the bolt loose, turn it out by hand if you want, or with a little quarter drive or something. They must coat all the threads with zinc or some kind of black phosphorus stuff. Works every time. Well, almost. I'm going to start working on this front, this mess up in the front here. This all stays on because I'm going to lift it off with the intake. I'm going to take the purge hose out of my way, and then when I have two hoses next to each other, someone's going through the trouble of putting a replacement vacuum line on there, which isn't the correct material. But that's alright. I'm not going to complain too much about it. I'll pull one off one side here, and then the other one I'll pull off the other side. You don't even have to try to remember that way. It's only going to go back together one way, right? Some electrical connectors. Yeah. And I think after that, after these electrical connectors, just should be the 10mm bolts, I think. There might be another brace bolt in the back. We'll see. Oh. Vacuum hose to the brakes. Get over there, you rascal. Of course, the valve cover has plastic tabs that the harness clips into. You gotta be really careful. Someone's already done these. A couple of the tie wraps were broken. You try to pry them out of the back, and you can't. The tie wraps just break. You can't get to the underneath with the valve cover in place. They're made to be put in and left, never to be taken out again. Cam sensor. The valve cover wraps around it. It's not in the valve cover. There's aluminum sticking up out here for it. So you definitely got to pull it off. You want to change the O-ring. So then the valve cover. You got a lot of cautions about putting the cam sensors near magnetized surfaces, and mechanics have a lot of magnetic trays. So I set it on a bundled up rag just to keep it off the tray and the magnets and stuff. And sometimes your coils come off without the boot, so. But the boot doesn't seem stuck in there very much. It's kind of strange. Shouldn't have said nothing. See, that's what happens. There's supposed to be a capsule in there too, so you got to look for the capsules. Hopefully this crossover tube won't break. They always do, but I would have had them order one if I looked at it. But this is, they turn the plastic, and it goes from valve cover to valve cover, and you got to disturb both sides, and they always split when you try to get it off because it turns into plastic. Not even tight. It's one of the things I always think about when I'm working on a leaking gasket. The torque specs are very critical, and half the time the bolts are loose when you go to take them out. I don't know, it looks like someone's done tune-up stuff on this, but not necessarily a valve cover. So we'll see. I know I'll torque them when I'm done, and we'll see what happens. Come on, you can do it! Looks like it might come off. That's pretty crazy, if you think about it. That last little bit I'm trying to be really careful with, because it's got to come over the little bump, the nipple on the end of that tube. Oh, nice. I think that one actually came off without splitting. Of course, it has to go back together too. Stop it. Valve cover should be just ready to lift off of there if I got all my bolts out. Yeah. This one here, there's a little snap clip down on the bottom you have to undo, and a snap clip in the valve cover, and you can get that harness just out of the way to get the one bolt. And then of course the tab goes under the harness, so you got to watch that when you feed it back in. Might have to pry that off with something. Ah, it wasn't so bad. I hope it's not going to make me move that harness completely out of the way. That would be terrible. Alright. See how you guys want to play it. That's alright, Nissan. I got you. I got you. Look at that thing. That's ugly. Clean these off real nice. Look very carefully in the valley of the cylinder head for any dirt or debris that might have gone in there. It's pretty hard to keep it 100% clean, but you'll be able to see anything big. So you definitely got to give it a look. And I'll usually wipe the cam lobes down with my oily fingers, not with a brake clean rag, just to make sure any little particles of dirt are off the cam lobes. This is pretty good. I'm I'll do extra cleaning in the corners where the silicone goes at the joints, just to make sure we don't get oil seepage out of those joints. You want all the oil film off of there. That's critical. The gasket's not as critical as the silicone area. Alright, I cleaned this thing up in the parts washer, and then I sprayed the nasty parts washer fluid off with brake clean. I mostly clean it. It's really dirty mineral spirits in there because it needs to be clean. But it still cleans better than if I use like 4 cans of brake clean. Very wasteful. So anyway, spray it down with brake clean, remove the residue from the parts washer. One thing I noticed, these tube seals are hard as rocks, and the gasket set doesn't come with them. So let's run up front and let them know, see what they want to do. I wouldn't be surprised the way Nissan does things if you have to get the whole valve cover to get these. Not really sure, but we'll see. Alright, they're working on a tube seal debacle and seeing if it's whole valve covers or just the seals. We can get the seals. I'm going to go ahead and take the intake off, start taking the back apart while we're waiting. Definitely do not want to drop anything in there. This will keep dust out, and if I do drop a screw, it doesn't fall down in the head into a bad place. Alright now, don't be a problem child. Oh, there's something else up there. Oh, the PCB valve hose. Alright, let's get that PVC hose off. The first order of business is to turn that clamp so we can get to it, because it's facing down. So, oh, the 90s called. They want their air gun back. I gotta say that every time he uses it. I'm getting Joe electric tools for his birthday. Oh, look at that monstrosity. Isn't she a thing of beauty? That might be a slight exaggeration on my part. You know what? I don't really feel secure about that setup. I'm going to go a little further. This intake manifold is basically a funnel for dirt and hardware. Oh, I might be able to get to these clips from the bottom. That's nice. Yeah, the rear valve cover's leaking worse than the front was. And the front was definitely leaking. It's so funny. Everyone comes up, that door's locked. Yeah. That's why the sign says use other door.
You see what this car look like?
Nah.
Well, go up to the office real quick, I dare you. I dare you.
Really?
Yep.
Do I need a HEFA permit? Now I got all this. Look at it. The clips came out and everything. We can get to them. That's nice. Now we're going to try to get this out of the way. Got my oxygen sensor connector. Gotta remember that. Got my breather tube. I'm going to try not to take it off of that valve cover. Alright, much like the front one. Cam sensor, 3 coils, and about 10 or 12 volts I think it was. Maybe 9. Be free! The hell? I know. Oh, one more bolt. That's what the problem is. Don't pry too hard, because there might be another bolt somewhere in here. That was only a test. I was just testing. Man, I'm already getting the new car vibes. The spark plug tube grommets are not available, serviced with the valve cover. We're going to rock it as is and hope we fix most of the oil leaks. This has a Boss for exhaust cam sensor too, but probably just wasn't doing it the first year they designed it, so they just made one part. Only the one sensor's in it. The valve cover doesn't accommodate the other one. Well, that's some nasty stuff, boys and girls. Some nasty stuff. But we'll be alright. We'll make it work. I'm gonna shake this off, dry it off pretty good. So you know it's clean when the brake clean really dries it out. I'm gonna let this drip before I carry it across the shop so I don't make too much of a mess. Another thing these flush cutters come in handy for fixing the gasket so it fits the application. Makes a pretty nice clean cut. Not as if it was molded correctly, but it'll work. And since my silicone outlet is hardened up, I'll get some from the side. That's something. Try to be pretty generous with it in these corners. It's like one of the most likely leak paths. It's about where I like it. I can see the blue gasket around here. New O-ring, a little clean engine oil. Doesn't take much, just a tiny bit on your finger, so it's not completely dry when you shove it in. We're not doing the tube seals, but these O-rings came with them, might as well put them on, right? inch pounds the first pass, and 74 the second. Just doing my final check. The reason that these loosen is not because the torque's not correct. I was just messing around before. I do that maybe a little too much, but the reason they loosen is because the valve cover material hardens. And what keeps tension on the bolts is the pliability of the valve cover gasket. Once it turns to plastic, it's not pushing up on the bolts at all while they're tightened down. So that's the reason they come loose. Alright, everything's torqued. Cam sensor, all my valve cover bolts. There's one in the middle here, one in the middle, and then this one here next to the cam sensor you got to remember too. Not that I would forget, I'm just saying. Pull my harness back in place. And make sure to plug that thing in right off the bat. Then we got coils, cam, injectors. This is the bracket for the power steering hose that bolts to the intake. Sometimes what I'll do if these break really bad is just tie wrap it to that tab. See that extra click? I always like to go over them just to make sure, because it's too much work to redo it. You know, stuff seems to happen even when you do that, but it just happens a lot less. I think the back's done. We're on to the front now. No point wasting half a tube of silicone. Squeeze a little out, and then it'll replug itself when it dries. Make a new hole until it's empty. Waste not, want not. This is all cleaned up, silicone's on, valve cover's ready. It's going to be a little tricky because of this hose, because of this harness. I have to get my pry bar back out. Give myself just a skosh more room. Now the tension is these spark plug tubes. They want to fight you a little bit. Make sure I see my gasket all the way around. Nothing worse than your gasket moving when you didn't catch it. You can even use a mirror and look at the bottom edge. Just to make sure I can see blue all the way across the valve cover. Nice. Alright. The old O-rings, like I said, I think on the other one. Fast and Furious, bro. The old O-rings aren't really in bad shape, but came with new ones, so we're using them. Make sure you don't see any metal or any particles on the face of this where it rides against the wheel. Sometimes it rides on the bottom, sometimes the side. Just a tiny little bit of motor oil, doesn't take much. Never use the bolt to pull these sensors in. You got to seat that all the way 100%. If you use the bolt, you break the ear off the sensor almost every time. Nice and easy. We're just seating them so we can torque them, right? Saving ourselves some hand spinning. That's all we're doing. Almost every valve cover and almost every cylinder head, with very, very few exceptions, Yo, that was Dom's charger that went by. My goodness gracious, I should have got a picture. They always want to go in a circle when you torque them. So you start at 1 bolt, 2 bolts, 3 bolts, 4, all the way out in a circle. Get bigger and bigger as you tighten the bolts. That way you're pushing whatever you're tightening out from the center. We're on the home stretch. Pull that over the dipstick. 2 grounds go to the timing cover. See how everything kind of falls in place too. So some people get nervous that they have to remember all that, but most of the time the connectors fall where they're supposed to go. And with very few exceptions, they won't plug into the wrong connector. Although there has been some Nissans that the TPS and the mass airflow sensor or MAP sensor were right next to each other on near the throttle body. And people would put engines in them and switch those connectors and it wouldn't run right. And it was a little bit of a bear to figure out, but same exact connector, 3 inches apart. What are you gonna do, right? 2 grounds. And I took this vacuum hose. This goes to the vacuum motor mount. Another great idea. I've kind of tweaked it out of the way. So
I'll finish working on this.
yeah, do that, man, will you?
What?
I know. I said, get on it, Bill.
On it.
Just don't smash your hand into nothing.
Yeah, really.
How's them knuckles doing, good?
They're good. They haven't closed completely, but they don't bleed anymore. They still hurt, like just
Sore, yeah.
very, very, very tender.
I smashed mine in about 4 times. I opened it back up.
Yeah.
Now it's like a little tiny vagina. Now, in case anything's on these rags, you roll them away. Don't just lift them off there. Something might happen. I think that's about it. One more look over. That's where the power steering bracket bolts to. It doesn't brace the manifold like they used to brace them on some of the older ones, I remember, but not this one. Alright. Yeah, see how easy this job is? I mean, it's crazy. 2.7 hours. Not bad. Okay, that's not really true, but it's not as bad as it looks. It's just, you should probably pay about 4 hours, I think. I know the Nissan guys that do this all the time could probably do this job in like an hour and a half. You know, my next car will probably be a Mercedes or Jaguar or 65 Buick, I don't know. It's different when you don't do the same cars all the time. Let's get this torque down. Well, I'm wondering if this bolt was going through this hose. I don't see a witness mark, and I cannot pass the bolt through the bracket, but it threads into the manifold. I'm thinking I pulled this bolt out of the manifold and this wasn't even attached. I don't know. It's kind of strange. The bolt doesn't fit through, but it does bolt into the manifold. So it's the right bolt. Very odd. We'll figure it out after lunch. I think what happened on this thing is they had it bent open as a tray to hold the hose and have the hose lays down in it, because that hole was too small. I just put it back the way because I tried to bend it closed, so I just bent it back open. Anyway, I'm also going to change out that vacuum hose. Someone had some clear vinyl tubing on there. Can't bring myself to put it back on, so I got a piece of vacuum hose. And now we're headed to new car status. Got a nice new air filter in it. See where the air filter got down. Because Nissan engineers are stupid. That's my working theory. Wiper cowl.
He drove like a Prius.
Somebody was going to stay in there while I bolted it all together. I guess not. This is another one of those things where you want to put all the bolts in before you tighten any of them. Because if one of them holes is off just a tiny bit, then you got to loosen all the ones you already tightened, right? I always get all, especially because they're little 10 millimeters. You don't want to force them into a hole that's not centered. Now I go ahead and tighten them. I'll do the big 14s last. Alright, these little plastic clips that go under the glass. There you go. Alright, some plastic clips and a couple wiper blades. New car! The big one's in front, I don't know why, it makes me feel better.
Alright, cool.
Plastic caps. Getting a little cocky putting this on before starting it up, but that's how I feel. I'm rolling with it. Alright, that's tight. That's all good. There's a rubber grommet missing off of the little stud thing here. That might make some noise, but that's alright. We'll fire it up. Oh man. Oil's a little over full too. I'm going to see if they want to correct that. Could be enough to cause a little issue. That's got to cause some glare on the windshield now. That's a little better. At least I'll be able to see when I'm driving it. I won't have the glare in my face. I'm going to let it run a little bit. Make sure nothing really weird is going on in a few minutes, and then we'll take this thing for a drive and see what's next. We're going to go ahead and do the knock sensors. Got some quality Napa parts. See what happens. Maybe we'll be done with it this time. I think for all our sakes, I'll just time lapse it. Maybe I'll put it right back to regular video during the actual knock sensor part, since that'll be new. makes me kind of sad. Apparently it is my fault, so I got to come back a legitimate one. But somehow, when this sensor was wrong and I had to jam my wrench down there, I must have cracked the edge off of this connector. So
2 sensor connectors coming.
these release on the back side. We got a new plastic connector coming. I'm just going to take the wires out of it so I don't have to cut into the harness. This one's on me. It's my fault. Of course, some of the blame goes on the fact that the sensor wasn't right and I had to change it out in the first place. But that's all right. I broke it. So let's see how long it takes to get the connector and get this thing back together for the guy. Alright, let's get in this thing and see how it's running. And I got the scanner on there, bring up my 2 knock sensor data PIDs, and we'll go over some things, how this happened and what I could do in the future to prevent it. Ah, that's nice. That is nice. Well, check engine light didn't come on right away, so we're getting somewhere. Oh, look at that. That ain't gonna work. Let's get this thing in here, get them talking, and bring up the data PIDs, and we'll see what happened. We'll explain what happened, I should say. Knock sensor 1 and 2, graphing data, combine. Alright, that's what they're supposed to do. So, it's fixed. Now let's go over what went wrong, because this kind of stuff really, I mean, I worked all day today from bell to bell. I'm the last one working. Obviously you see the doors are all closed, it's pretty dark, and I got 4 hours today. So a couple things happened. The cheap parts we got, that sender was wrong and I had to switch over the sender. I take a lot of the blame because I should have pulled that housing back off to change that sender, but I decided to sneak a wrench in there and do it, and I think my wrench cracked the knock sensor connector, so it was just barely hanging on. That's why you had to accelerate hard to get the issue to happen and set the code. If you drove it normally, it never set the code, because we drove this car 3 times before we gave it back to the customer. We didn't want to have any more problems. Of course, the customer took it, romped on it right off the bat to see what would happen. So, and I drove it this morning and it didn't do it. I did some testing. I knew something didn't look quite right with knock sensor 2. It was going down instead of up. So when I finally got upset enough to beat on the customer's car, I don't like to do that. I saw he had 85% throttle and all that kind of thing. So I did it. And as soon as I did it, it flatlined, set the code, and then the computer disregards that sensor, the knock sensor 2. So I took it all apart as soon as, and I tried getting in there with my screwdriver and pushing on it. But what was happening, I could only get to the left side of the connector, and that was attached. It was the right side. The connector actually turned like that, so it was just touching. And under heavy acceleration, the wiring harness would just move it. Lesson learned. And being thorough and driving it 3 times didn't help either, because we didn't beat on the customer's car. If we would have beat on it a little bit, we would have seen it ourselves, because the customer took it and beat on it. Maybe, I don't know if he drives like that all the time, or he drives like that when he gets a vehicle back to see what might happen. I don't know. In any event, that's not his fault. I should have caught that somehow, or taken the housing back out to replace that sensor myself correctly instead of doing it in a rush. The flat rate world, once in a while you get burned like this, and I end up working for free because I'm not going to charge a customer for something that was my fault. Whether it's 100% my fault, 10% my fault, it wasn't any fault of the customers. Maybe the only thing we could say is we offered them the Dodge part, and it was like 5 times as much money 3 times as much money. I don't want to exaggerate. It was 3 times as much. But he opted for the cheaper part. So I ended up having to make the cheaper part work, caused myself more grief, and I learned a valuable lesson, very expensive lesson. The other car that I did the valve cover gaskets on wasn't quoted correctly. They quoted 2.7. Should be more like 3.7 or 3.9 hours. And then of course you saw the oil was overfilled. It looked like it was half a quart. It's hard to tell. The hash marks were, 5/8 of an inch, 3/4 of an inch below where the oil level was. But we didn't have any symptoms or any complaints about anything until we sent the apprentice out to drive it, and it started smoking really bad. So I spent some time draining oil out of that and filling the oil to the correct level so that we could run it a bit and get it to stop smoking. He didn't mention that, but we never ran it enough. Bill checked for leaks and sold the valve cover gaskets, and I checked the oil because I check the oil on every car I work on. I saw it was overfilled. And at that point, I probably should have stopped and drained some oil out of it. But I was trying to get to this car because this is a problem, and the guy's angry, and I don't blame him. This is the 4th time I've worked on it. So I took the intake plenum off 3 times and the lower intake off twice. So we're starting the new year off a little aggravated, but on the right foot because we're doing the right thing, taking care of our business. I can't rip somebody off and sleep well. I'm not going to start the new year off especially that way anyway. Even if I don't think that kind of a person, I hope they wouldn't want to start the year off like that, but I wouldn't do either way. But that's where we're ending this video, guys. Everyone's gone. I got to lock this place up. Try to get some sleep tonight. Hopefully I won't be too restless. This kind of thing keeps me tossing and turning. But thanks for watching today's video. Hope you'll torque the like button. Hope you'll subscribe, and I hope I'll see you in the next video because you're awesome.